When I start a project, I'll just do some basic research. In this case, I'm looking for an M2A1 105 artillery, and just confirming that's what it looks like, and that's what I want to make. So now I'll search for an STL file, which will let me 3D print. So this one on Yegi looks pretty good. So scroll down. Great, this looks like the one I want. Let's download that file. Download complete. Now I'll quickly check it in Microsoft 3D and make sure there's no errors on the file. If it would turn red here if there was holes in the file, and I could generally quickly repair using the 3D Builder tool. Alright, now we're in Tinkercad. Not a high-powered tool, but good enough for me in most instances. I'm importing the file in inches, and we're starting with it as a very large file, as you can see. So start shrinking it down to something manageable. Now I'm bringing over a disk. This is what the artillery is going to sit on. So I know I want about a half-inch disk. So 0.0 or 0.55. I'm just setting it to inches, and I'm setting off the lock to grid here. Turning off the lock to grid. So 0.55. Okay, now I wanted about 0.1 inch high thickness. So the cannon's pretty small. Just bring it up level on top of the disk, what it's going to look like when it's sitting on the disk. So this is going to require probably 2 rounds of printing. This first round, I know these legs and barrel and pieces are too fragile, but I'll print it as a first try and see what it looks like. So now I'm going to add some wings. I call them, I guess the best word for them, wings for the legs of the artillery, because they don't quite fit on the half-inch disc. Sometimes I shorten the legs, but in this case I'm just going to use the as is, because it would look a little strange maybe if I shorten the legs too much. I could probably shrink them a third and no one would ever know, but I think it's okay as is. Maybe in the final product I'll shrink them down in the next version, but give this a try first. So now I'm using the flip tool to flip that kind of wing over, and I use that frequently, the align tool, to center and line things up. 99% of this is eyeballing. At a half-inch, these things are half-inch scale, or about 170. Well, the infantry are 172. I'm not sure what scale these would be at, but on a half-inch disc, I don't do a lot of precise measuring. It's, like I said, it's 99% eyeballing. So I just brought in a Japanese Type 92 that I just finished previously to this one, just to scale it and see about what it looks like. Like I said, I can see the barrel and the legs are going to be too fragile as compared to the Japanese Type 92 sitting there in the pink. But we'll just see how it turns out. So I magnetize all my pieces and to stick to a steel board. So now I'm adding holes for the magnets, 1/16 by 1/16 inch holes that the magnets will slide into. So these will be vacant spaces in the print. And I want a magnet here because I have flags instead of the discs that most Axis and Allies players use. They use those plastic discs, but I really can't stand those. So I printed flags, and I'll show that in the final version too, what that flag looks like. And then these 2 magnets are just to help it stick to the board so they don't slide around when dice get rolled or bounced around. So I'm just making sure they're centered to each other and that they don't stick up through the top of the base. Bringing in some text. I usually use Sans or Sans Mono. It's going to say 105 for 105 millimeter. So I think it's pretty good there. In some places I put on the side or I put two words kind of wrapping around the side, but in this case I'll put it right at the bottom and play around with it till I get it right. I know in the final version that it's not going to be quite this size. I think it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be a little, it's going to be about this size. Alright, so just a final check. Make sure everything looks appropriate. I'm just trying to squeeze a little bit more out of this. If you go too much, the wheels will look elongated. But if I can squeeze a millimeter of height out of it, just to give it a little more girth and size, I'll kind of play around with those. Here I'm adding the legs, the pegs that will fit into the holes that I will put in the base as well. So these little pegs will help me align it when I glue it to the base later after painting. Pretty tedious, this part, actually trying to make sure the pegs don't show up when it's on the base. Make sure that they're not too long, that they don't go through the base. So now I'm going to make the hole using a copy of that peg. So I flip it to the, once I get it kind of sized, flip it to a hole using the hole function. Again, eyeballing, never really that precise. It's close enough. Make a copy of those, move them to the other side, line them up, center them, attach them to the cannon itself using the merge function, or the group function, I think it might be called. And that's about it. There I'm grouping it together as one piece. Now I'm just going to check, make sure that when it's sitting on the disc, when it's glued in, that the legs also don't overextend into the base itself, but it looks okay. Now I'm exporting it as an STL so I can bring it into Lychee Slicer, and then that will eventually get saved to a USB and put into the printer for printing. So here I'm exporting the base. Now I'll go over back to the 3D Builder and make sure there's no errors, no holes in the print. So if I click on this, it's red. So if I click in the lower right, it will fill in the holes and fix any errors before printing. So now I will add the files into Lychee Slicer. And this is what exports the file for print. So just kind of a double checking here, making sure things fit. It's blue. If there were holes in the print, it would be these pieces would be red. So I'm just rotating the base now because I know that's the best. After doing hundreds of these, I know that's the best way to print it with minimal supports. And I'm lowering them because the closer they are to the bottom, to the plate, the faster they'll print. There's just fewer layers to print. So I'm just doing a quick check here. I'm adding supports to see where it thinks it needs supports, but then I'll typically manually add the supports. Same thing on the cannon. I'll do a quick support, automatic support, to see what it thinks are the most critical places to add supports. And then I'll delete them, and then I'll add them manually. I don't know what that white line is in this. Something happened here, but it didn't print. So just from experience, I know I can add the supports there. I don't typically need as many as it adds. This isn't a heavy duty, heavy print. And that's about enough, I think. Yeah, that looks pretty good. don't want to add too many supports because then it's difficult to remove. So I'll export these to a USB, and there's it showing the layers that the prints will happen. And these are, I don't know how many fractions of a millimeter these layers are, but this will take 1 hour and 41 minutes. In the lower left it shows, and there's the export, and it's ready to put in the printer. Just hitting print here, selecting the file, and away it goes. So that's the build plate dropping down into the resin. In one of the future videos I'll cover what resin I use, but I use the frozen aqua mixed with some tenacious. The tenacious keeps it a little soft. And this is almost near the end. 2 layers left of 355. And here I'm scraping it off the build plate. One has to wear gloves because the resin is toxic. There are some non-toxic water-based versions, but I haven't tried those. So now I'm washing it off in 90% isopropyl alcohol to remove whatever resin may still be on there. Normally you'd probably wash it a little more than this, but this is more of a prototype. Then I use a little UV light to cure it. This resin cures, you can also put it out in the sunlight, but this speeds up the process. It doesn't take too long to cure it. And that's the finished product. So now I'll separate it from the supports. Probably could have been washed a little better, but good enough. There's the holes for the magnets. So this should come off pretty easily, which it does. Looks a little wet underneath. Maybe I didn't let it dry enough. And on the front, I think I need some more supports because that kind of front armor plate looks kind of angled, like it didn't print properly, like it didn't have enough supports. But it fits into the base pretty snugly. I had to push a little bit more pressure. I might try to make those holes a little bigger to get it all the way in, because you can see there that it needs some pressure. And there you can see the front, that front armor plate kind of angles up because I think it needs some support. And the legs are kind of sticking up off the wings there, so if I just bend it a little bit, or the glue will hold it. And there's the finished product. So now I will go paint it and show you the final painted version. Here's the finished version. Not my finest paint job, but quick and dirty enough to get on the board. Anyway, at this size, about the size of a penny, no one's going to see many imperfections. And here it is next to the original 105 from Axis and Allies. I kind of go between glossy and flat. Not sure which one I like, but hope you enjoyed the video, and let me know if you have any questions.